Thank you, Minister. So I'd like to introduce our next panel, the mobility panel. Please, panelists, come up on stage. So, and I hand over to the moderator, Andreas from NEO. It's a great pleasure to have you here. NEO, for those who don't know it, is one-of-a-kind startup from China, now a global company producing electric vehicles. The stage is yours.
Thank you, Herbert. I would just start over with our panelists, because we have really a superset of speakers for this mobility panel. So we don't need to waste some time, just hand over the introduction. So welcome to, you want to do the introduction on your own? We can do it like this, okay. So just come, everyone here. This is Andrej from Artisense, but yeah, I will leave now the words to you.
Yes, my name is Andrej. I am CEO of Artisense.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Patrick, co-founder of Lilium.
I'm Ben Upcroft, VP of Technology for Oxbotica.
I'm Constantin, founder of Wirelane. I thought we had like 2 minutes to introduce the company, but no matter what, we'll just move it to later, I guess.
I think we should do that because you have really interesting projects and companies. So I will add some more words. Let's start with Wirelane. You also brought up something like your kind of device to electrify the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So this guy's not working, so can I use yours? Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so Wirelane is a full service provider for electromobility, and the company has a very personal touch to me. I started driving an electric vehicle about 5 years ago, and some of the biggest, almost unsurmountable problems at that time were the so-called RIP or RIP problems. So that's range, infrastructure, and price. And as you all might have heard, there's a company from the West Coast who solved the range problem, and I'm pretty sure that the major OEMs will actually solve that problem for their products as well. So we thought that since the range problem is solved, what remains is the price problem, and as usual with a new product, you have this kind of fantastic industrial learning curve where you cut prices down to 1/10 over a period of 10 years, which is the fact in battery technology as well. So we are pretty sure that the price problem will be solved within the next couple of years. So what really remains is, as you said, the infrastructure. And to be honest, when I started driving an electric vehicle, the infrastructure was so bad, or it is still so bad, that it just pissed me off to a point where I said, okay, I just have to fix it, right? So we moved into this space, and what we created was a charge point that is stuffed with technology, and please feel invited to visit us at our booth next door. But the most important thing for today, for a tech conference, would be that we are the first to actually implement a token transfer. So based on the blockchain, we send a token from a smartphone wallet to the wallet of the charge point, thus avoiding payment service provider cost and roaming cost. And I think this is really the precondition for this whole system to work. So feel invited to visit us at our booth and enjoy the talk.
So next we have Andrej from Artisense. So he works on understanding and seeing and localizing in the environment with only state-of-the-art kind of cheaper cameras. So
yeah, thanks, Andres. I think we have seen in the talk of Ben all those applications where today we get autonomous applications like in ports, airports, mines, also on the roads. So everyone works on autonomous mobility. At Artisense, we create maps, we create 3D maps, and we map the whole world and keep this map up to date, which is, as we have seen in Ben's talk, is crucial for localizing, and also localizing in GPS-denied environments where GPS or GNSS is not available.
Great. So Patrick, I guess you didn't brought up your device? No?
No, not yet.
So he's from Lilium, and he brings mobility into the third dimension. And as I understand, you are working on the perfect shape and dynamics for this device.
Yes, so what we are building is an air taxi. What we are basically developed the past 4 years is the combination of the flexibility of a helicopter with the efficiency of a business jet, and we want to bring this actually to everybody here up in the sky, and we want to serve basically as a taxi service. And as stated, it was initially only responsible for aerodynamics and design, yet I switched to the product and want to show it a little bit more to the people today.
Great, so Ben, you already had the stage for some minutes, but something you want to add? I heard you were a former professor in Australia for computer vision.
So okay, I can add to that. So my background is in computer vision and robotics. I've been deploying robots into various domains for many years now, into mines, haul trucks, drag lines. We mapped out the Great Barrier Reef using computer vision alone over hundreds of kilometers using an underwater, unmanned underwater vehicle. So I love robots. I love the machine learning side of things. I love the artificial intelligence, and it's a real privilege to be in this space. And I think being involved in one of the biggest experiments that AI has ever been in self-driving cars.
Great. So before we continue, I would propose we make it more comfortable and sit down. Yes, so I want to start with an easy question, which also gives you kind of the room to betray some secrets from your beginnings. So I think everybody here would love to hear some crazy stories, how it all started. So my question would be, most times you once have, or on the one side you can have this market pull, where you have really a use case and you need kind of to find a technology that enables that. On the other side, you could have like really a specific new technology and you utilize that and push it within a certain kind of use case to the market. So how was it in your case? And what was the funny story behind that?
Yeah, so for me, I was working for one large German car maker, and so we worked with different technologies like Mobileye, and also we paid $3 billion for here. And one thing that I figured out that there is no technology for localization in also in any place, like in GPS-denied environments, and I think this is where I discovered computer vision that can solve these problems and also create 3D reconstructions of the world. That's until now was very expensive to achieve using very expensive LiDARs and unprecise GPS.
Great. So your question was market pull or technology push. So to answer that for e-mobility, I think we still don't really have a market pull. So it's we're deeply convinced that what we do is right, which means that my promise to my kids, for example, is that they will never see a combustion engine vehicle in their life, or at least they won't drive one. So for the last couple of years, that has worked out. So I think it's really about pushing a new technology into a market of which we think that it's just deeply right for the environment, for humanity as a whole. And the reason for that being is that I come from photovoltaics. So in my former life, besides starting two tech businesses, I built solar power plants. And as you might all remember, solar power plants go along with a certain feed-in tariff. So you would get a tariff from the government, which guaranteed a certain price for electricity for 20 years. So after building those plants for a number of years, I was thinking, okay, by the time my first plants, they run out of the feed-in tariff, my kids will be something like 18. So what are they going to do with the electricity? And this is when I really started started thinking about a holistic energy system. So what does that compose? It's actually composed of the production side, which we are in pretty good control of. So 35% of the energy in Germany is already renewable. So the question is really, what about the consumption side? And burning fossil fuels is obviously not the right thing to do. So we were thinking, okay, how can we fix this? How can we push more consumers, more electricity consumers into the market, thus replacing combustion engine vehicles? And so we came up with this idea to start an e-mobility company. However, 10 years ago, being an entrepreneur by heart, we realized it was definitely too early. There were no products in the market. And as I said, already today, or even today, there's no strong market pull. So we don't see that much demand from the consumer side. But we just think that it's the right product and time will come. So this is how we started this company. And obviously, we had wished for more market pull. But we're going the other way around, and we push this technology into the market.
Yeah, in our case, it was a little bit different. So we didn't have any market pull at all. It was like a combination of 4 friends, too much beer, and frustration in a PhD. And this is why we decided, okay.
Goes in the right direction, by the way.
At one point, one of our co-founders and CEO, he came back from Glasgow with an idea, and then he pulled out the other 4 engineers, or the other 3 engineers, together to capture like all parts of aircraft designing. And then we basically said, okay, fuck it, we do it. And we were fighting really against windmills, against Airbus and everybody else. But yeah, this is how it started.
I think robotics has been there's been a bunch of people in robotics for many, many decades now trying to solve this holy grail of understanding where you are within the world. And that technology started to be proven in, I don't know if anyone's heard the DARPA Grand Challenge, and it was this challenge that DARPA set up for any university and combined with a company to try to drive across California and Nevada, I think it was. And the first year that the DARPA Grand Challenge was set, I think it was 2004, if anyone remembers, I think they drove about 7 kilometers before all of them had crashed. The next year they drove 130, 140 miles at that point, and then it snowballed from there. So the DARPA Grand Challenge really set in motion not just the technology, but the belief in that technology as well. And a number of companies started pushing that forward. So there was a market push, a research push, because there were a bunch of geeks trying to find out how robotics worked and could you make a car drive by itself, to a point where I think there's a significant market pull now. This is a multi-trillion-dollar industry, US trillion-dollar industry that people are thinking. So in various spaces, mobility as a service, taxis, logistics, etc. It's also got a massive societal impact as well. I think it's about a million people die of car accidents every year. If you can, and most of the time that's human error. And that's from looking at your mobile phone, distracted whatsoever, distracted, all sorts of types of things like that. Autonomous vehicles should never get distracted. They can see 360 degrees around your vehicle. If they just save 5% of lives, we're looking at tens of thousands of people that we save across the world. If you look at the types of accidents that that vehicles have globally, it costs, I think it's something like $2.7 trillion US globally in terms of hospital cover, fixing cars, etc. If you can just save 1% of that, we're still talking a multi-billion-dollar savings to both the community, the governments, and what we can do to help people from a societal perspective. So I think there's a massive market pull now.
So it sounds like you said it started in the early 2000 years, robotics. Like it's both the direction your Artisense and Oxbotica is coming from. You mentioned that electrification is still not really here. That was kind of your point. Flying taxis are also maybe more a long-term topic, or it's a big topic, so complex. So what I really wonder is, for all these disruptive technologies we have here on the stage, they will have an impact if they are a real market innovation. What do you see as most critical for yourself for succeeding as a market innovation? Is it more the talents, the own technology intelligence that nobody else has? Is it regulations, or feel free to add something here?
Awareness. My biggest part actually right now is still to create awareness that it will happen and that the question if it will happen is over. And that is just only a question when it will happen. And a lot of people actually think you are this whole eVTOL flying taxi services, that this is just nuts and it will never happen, and that it's just about bringing thousands of aircraft up in the air. They will all fall down and will actually create more chaos than actually solving a big problem. And actually bringing the people and taking them by hand, bringing them forward and say, hey, we don't want to harm you. We want to actually show you that it's making your life better. It's like one of our biggest points right now.
How is it with partners for you?
Pardon, sorry?
How is it with finding the right partners? Do you see like this is a topic for like a big collaborative effort, or is it really like you can push it if there is the awareness?
No, actually you have to push it like with the whole ecosystem. For example, a Volocopter from Karlsruhe, they are developing a multicopter as a drone personal air taxi, but for shorter distances. And actually it's not a competition with them, it's more like collaborating and creating the awareness and the space together for the people.
Okay, so for Artisense and Oxbotica, is it that you're focusing more on being prepared for a broader scope of use cases, or is your strategy more to really find this one market need you are perfectly fit and you're the best one?
Yeah, there are a broad spectrum of applications, but we are approaching this with focused on particular product, and I think what can push us is a scale effect. So it's totally important for us to achieve the scale and to push our technology as much as possible in the market.
Okay. So scaling is it similar? Is scaling funding, or is scaling also? I think enough talents in the short time.
I think yeah, but scaling is also delivering to the market, to the customers, so that it's less customization and consulting, but more where we can use infrastructure like online clouds, APIs, and deliver our products to the market at scale. But of course, talent plays an important role to scale product development.
What is your take on that?
I'd agree. To be able to drive.
Need a discussion? I'd agree. No.
Well, I'd agree. We can show that we can build self-driving cars. How you make that across fleets of vehicles, across cities, across globally. How do you provide that infrastructure? How do you create that infrastructure? And it's through talent, but also growing that talent as well. So scaling people through funding, but also to be able to create that hardware. It's not just the software. I think all of us understand that to be able to make something that you can touch is very different to the software side of things. Software I can just push out. I can copy and paste for free. I can't do that with hardware. So how do you scale that hardware? How do you scale the types of systems that you need on those vehicles to be able to have autonomy at a price that is for everybody, not just for the chosen few?
Just one more question to that. You talked about infrastructure. Like, what is your main concern or need? Maybe again, both of you, because it's kind of similar. What is your main need to get it to a product for the market?
Yeah, so for us, we actually create this infrastructure. So we create a 3D dynamic map, and this is one of the main piece of infrastructure which is needed for autonomous driving and autonomous robots. And the rest is already exists. So there are clouds. It's all very scalable. So we are focusing right now on building what we consider as most important piece of needed infrastructure.
Okay. It's really the DevOps side of things, or at least from where we come from, it's for the DevOps side of things, creating the pipelines that you need to create the maps, maintain those maps, update those maps, all automatically for different clients at different times. So again, agree.
Okay, so if we now ask Constantin, so I think it's kind of different for you. You're facing already some competition in the market, or a lot of efforts like big joint ventures in Europe, building up. You have already established competitors in the US, maybe also in China. What is your kind of strategy, or how do you position?
Yeah, totally. So before we get to that, I just want to add something to the biggest issues we're facing. It sounds really boring and dull and probably sometimes of frustrating, but it's really standardization. So all of us, we strongly fight with regulatory environments that are really necessary for our products to fly. So in our case, that's, for example, the charging infrastructure needs to be standardized in some way. Take the Type 2 plug, so that's the little electricity outlet you see there. If it hadn't been for that standard, I would never have touched that product, definitely not. So there's a certain set of minimum standards, and I think we can all subscribe to that it's really important to have industry standards. When it comes to competition, that's also an interesting one. I think it's, so to all the young entrepreneurs, the first timers here in the audience, don't be scared off by competition. I think it's the most stupid thing to do, to be really scared of competition, because in the end, it's really always about the product and the customer. And I really sometimes have to take people by the arm and shake them, also with my own team, and tell them, listen guys, stop researching competitors. It's really about focusing on our customer and creating the best product in the market. And then there's always so much room for innovation. So if you look at all the big tech companies in the world right now, and imagine what kind of competition they were facing 15 or 20 years ago, unsurmountable. I mean, the roadblocks were enormous. Take, for example, the iPhone. That's the best example of all. So I'm saying, yeah, there is money piling up in the market, but that's a very good thing, because it nurtures the ecosystem. So we see that money is coming in. But on the other hand, I'm totally not scared that someone from the US comes over to Europe, spends 100 million euros and owns the entire market. So that's not going to happen, because it's really, first of all, it's a deep tech business. So you really have to adjust the product to every single market. We're not in the US, it's Europe, and the EU 27 is a highly complex market environment. So the other thing is that it's not a social network. So it's not something that you can just take and spill over the entire continent. It's really infrastructure business. So it's dirty work, it's on the ground sales. That's why I think that there's room for quite a number of players. However, the innovation is obviously super important. And if there's one advantage we have as a young company, is that we can iterate quickly, we can adjust quickly to changes, to demand of our clients. And this is exactly what we do. So if you take this thing, for example, the reason for me being here today is mostly because we want to demonstrate that the blockchain technology has a real industrial purpose. So we are probably one of the first companies in the world who actually use the blockchain technology to reduce transaction costs. So by doing so, we avoid payment service providers, we avoid roaming hubs. And this is the kind of innovation I think will protect us from overwhelming competition and also from price battles.
I think the regulations is a big one, right? We all face that, and you have to be doing the boring work with governments, policymakers, regulatory frameworks to keep that going. Because we've got all the technology here is pushing that forwards. They don't have regulations for a lot of these things. So how do we keep pushing that forwards? How do we keep the technology moving forwards without having this red tape in the way? And so you have to work with those different parties to make that happen.
So I assume you're not only working in US or only Europe or only China. So is there a kind of a take from your side? Who is really the first mover for standardization and regulation? Or is it global?
In terms of countries, which are the first movers?
Yeah, or continents, I don't know.
I think North America and UK and Europe are doing amazing in terms, from a self-driving car perspective, in how they're staying flexible enough that we are able to test, deploy, and use these vehicles. But that regulatory framework will catch up, and we want to make sure that it's a sane regulatory framework in all those continents.
I would even push it a little bit further and say you have to go first in the markets where you have the highest regulatory hurdles. When you push it there and you make it there, you can make it everywhere in the world. A good example, we could just take one of our prototypes, go to Dubai, put a person inside and fly. What happens if it fails? There's a lethal incident, and out of the sudden, everybody in the whole ecosystem of flying taxis would just go bankrupt. There will be no funding anymore because it's not safe, and so on. So when you go like in the regions where you have like big regulatory hurdles, Europe, EASA, FAA in America, and you show basically that the technology can or has like all the necessary safety requirements needed to operate with people, you can basically go wherever you want. And this is like, I think, like more a strategic point that you have to keep in mind when you develop your technology.
It's a balance though, right? Like, so, because you don't want to be stopped with your technology because of regulation. So there's a kind of, it's a bit of a tension there that you have to play with.
But don't forget it, so like...
Okay. Most of you maybe know Facebook. There's something called network effect for deep tech startups or deep tech companies, deep tech intelligence. With your algorithms and your software, you're providing kind of infrastructure, a logic. You can work with the respective data, but this data is sometimes coming from fleets or some other parties. So the better the data or the better partner you have, the better chances that you will succeed on the market or your product, your version of the algorithm. So who do you see there more dependent, the big corporations, the big fleet providers, or the startup?
Yeah, I think it's about cooperating and working together, and I think excellent opportunities to do actually data sharing, because by sharing the data, the both parties, the corporates and startups, can profit out of working together. And you're right. So the data actually creates a network effect, because the more data we create and also share, the more also other technologies which runs, for example, in the vehicle on the hardware, we can bring to the market, and other way around.
Facebook's a tough one because I still don't understand how you...
It was more like a thing to catch everybody for the network effect, but obviously it's not not totally.
It's funny, like there's been other products like Facebook that have come out that are easy to use, simpler to use, at least for my brain, and haven't taken off. So I agree about the network effect. But there's other ones where the product is, there are other cases where that product is better. And I reckon having an excellent product, having a product that you're able to, that people want to use, able to use it easily, is an important part of that network, creating that network effect from a startup point of view. But also corporates help this. They will always be there. They'll always be able to have that inertia, to create that inertia. But also, it's not just about the data and collecting all the data. It's how you might use that data and the innovative ways that you'd use that data. And I think so. A combination of all those parties are important.
So, you want to add?
Yeah, I would like to add, I don't agree. There's a definition of the network effect, and that is that the value of the network increases exponentially with the number of users, so it's not the amount of data, in fact. And I just don't think that's true, because in our case, for example, so asking for the network effect, yeah, that would be that once a wallet is installed on the iPhone within our app, that means more users are actually able to use a token, whatever kind of token, to pay for their transaction. And that again increases the number of suppliers, which is charge point operators, to the network, and that creates a network effect. But just the sheer number of data will not create anything. So, and also besides that, I disagree that the kind of data aggregation we saw in the past is the future, else we wouldn't touch this blockchain issue. So for example, for us, it's not really about personalized data anymore. It's quite the contrary. So what we try to do is completely autonomous transactions. And the autonomous transactions, they are not specified to an individual. So think 10 years ahead from now, when vehicles are not only electric but also autonomous, what they will do is they will settle the balance between infrastructure and vehicle themselves. So yes, that does create data hotspots. Obviously, we will know about infrastructure usage and so forth, but it's not really the kind of personal data anymore that made companies like Facebook big. So I think that time is kind of over. So we're at a tipping point, and I think a technology like the blockchain, for example, will rather anonymize the kind of data we will produce in the future.
Okay, so for this kind of IP or data sharing, we see kind of a transition now.
That's my personal opinion, yeah.
So how is it generally working with corporations? I assume sometimes it's very annoying. So from your experience, what is kind of the most fruitful way, or how could the corporation really be more open to work with you, or make it easier for you to do a early stage development, a later development, a market entry project together? What is kind of like, yeah, something we can improve from the corporation side?
Yeah, really one important thing is like that companies, and we see it like in our daily life when we have suppliers, when they work with us, that they don't rely only on their processes, that they are open to how we are doing, how we are engineering, and then it happens a lot that they say, no, we cannot do it like this because X, Y, Z. But normally when you show them basically, yes, we can do it like this, when we do ABC, for example, then yeah, okay, maybe we can do it like this. And this is like when they have change a little bit the mindset and don't take this inertia from the big company inside a small, very agile company, then you actually benefit on both sides, actually.
So is it more a culture thing or more a process thing, that they need a process or a platform internally, or is it really just a mindset?
Yeah, it's a mindset thing, and often processes follow your mindset. So when you have a certain mindset and it's super slow, then you develop processes based on this super slow and bad thought through mindset.
What is the best case? Do you have a best case for working together with? You don't need to name, but like.
No, actually, in the same way, we have to be in the same way flexible also with terms of security compliance with our suppliers. We cannot say, yeah, leave the cable outside or something like this, because then it's, for example, not safe. So we have to rely, of course, also on the mindset of our suppliers. So it's like an iteration, cultural get-together a little bit more like, and then you can really get momentum in development processes.
Does any one of you have a best case?
A best case in general, I think it touches a really interesting point, because to work with medium-sized companies or small companies as a startup helps a lot. Usually they're owner-run, yeah. So that means that you don't have a lot of processes. I will give you a very precise example. Last year when we were looking for suppliers, and by the way, that counts all along the value chain. So from supplier to partnerships to clients, it's really more difficult to work with large corporates as a small company, because there's just so many obligations to fulfill that that you won't make it. So when we went to China to go for suppliers and check sourcing, we also went to Foxconn. And in the first step, it's literally impossible to ramp a product with a company like Foxconn. Not because they're doing a bad job, but because the kind of documentation they require from a startup just kills the entire process of getting there, right? So another example is with a newsletter provider, very simple and stupid example, but the company we actually found to work with us is probably as big as we are, versus a company that was corporate owned, which made it much more difficult for us to integrate our processes. And I can only recommend to anyone starting a company to start long tail and start with the rather smaller accounts, because we all want to work with the whales and obviously want to do business with the big OEMs, but really getting there as a startup can kill you, I think. So we should be aware of that.
Yeah, I think it can be beneficial to work with corporates since they are also our customers and our future customers, and it's crucial to understand what are their customer requirements so that we can adjust our development pipeline to these requirements. So we have actually done quite good experience working with large companies, like for example Airbus.
It's good to get your product out there and get some feedback on it, and corporations can help you there. Some bad cases. The world's changing enough that IP is our value, right? Like what we know and why we create a startup is because we have some knowledge that we want to be able to get out there, and that's what we value. And we've often had corporates come in and bully and try to get that IP, like take that IP, and I think they have to understand that's what we value so much that it shouldn't be it shouldn't be that standard way of doing business is no longer, I think. We need to stand up and be confident about what the IP that we use and be confident against corporates that do want to bully us into taking their IP for that particular domain or more.
So for this,
I think corporates, especially in Europe, they used to work with the universities, what they call collaboration, and at the end, basically acquiring IP from the universities. And in the US, it's a little bit different because their universities, like Stanford, are much more aggressively commercializing IP, and I think this is what we have to also demonstrate in Europe to corporates, that we are creating products and not selling IP here.
so you just mentioned with the proof of concept maybe, or doing a use case testing together, you can also get feedback from the market. I remember a conversation from yesterday with Andrej, who said it's also sometimes like not that easy, because maybe you get pushed into a kind of direction if you're too focused on doing like POCs.
Yeah, so it's of course beneficial to have or to avoid having corporate investor maybe in the seed round, in the early round, where the product is actually forming. And I think it's much more would be helpful to have corporates investing in later stages, like from Series A, B, and then also where we as a startup have possibility to have multiple corporates so that we can diversify the interests, and then this should work.
Okay, because you just mentioned investments,
right?
So Lilium and Artisense also, you had some investments in the past. Lilium now has a Chinese investor, Tencent. I would really be interested in kind of getting some sharing about the experience and what's kind of the difference from getting investments or working with investors from US to Europe to China.
I don't think there's actually a big difference working with Chinese, American, Europe investors, as long as the fund or the investors themselves have the right mindset for what you are actually doing. And for example, just to give you what I mean with that is at the very beginning we had like a fund which was related to very big aviation industry coming from Germany, and they basically told us, guys, stop what you're doing here right now. You should really stop and tell nobody what you actually did here, because you will never find a job again. And this was like our very first experience with the German VC. Then we found another German VC who had no touch to aviation at all, and he basically said, okay, my heart says yes, my head says no. And he was the initial trigger actually to find like subsequent new investors with the same mindset. So it all depends like what is the vision of the investors? Do I want to have my cash return within 3 years? Sorry, in air taxi space it won't happen in this fast pace. And in the same sense, we found also Tencent as an extremely innovative, with a very precise idea where we want to go. It's sorry to say it again, the mindset of but this time of the investors. And this all depends on your mission and your vision.
I think for us, since we do our product development here in Munich, in Bavaria, we are very lucky to have Video Ventures that comes from Munich as our investor, and this is also a real help since these guys are very well connected with the whole infrastructure here, and I think it would be less helpful to have investor from somewhere else, like from UK or China, who can help us in less extent here where we are and where we working right now on developing our products.
So just one question to that. So even if it's just a risk like a VC investment, no strategic investment, you still see like kind of a stream, or you get a little bit into that direction where the VC is coming from. Or like you mentioned, there is kind of relation between the geographics, for example, V2 Ventures from Munich, so it's not the same like you would have a Chinese investor. So even if it's just a VC risk investment, there is still kind of influence.
I think the most important is VCs invest. I think money is not the most important what you can get from a VC, and it's more at connections, and you should also see it in different stages. So in maybe seed stage where the product development happens, it's definitely better to have a VC where you are. So this is why also US VCs prefer to invest in early stage companies that are just across basically the Sand Hill Road, sitting in Palo Alto. And I think in later stages where it's getting to acquire markets and scale worldwide, it can be very beneficial also to have investors from China, since China is a huge market, and this is where then Chinese investors would help better to scale.
Yeah, so currently we're self-funded, so we have plenty of skin in the game, but we do have some experience with investors in the past. So there are some stories I can add to that. A very general thing is that I think not only investors but also entrepreneurs, we need to be much more risk-taking. So if I see hours and hours of discussions around KPI-based business plans, it's so ridiculous. I mean, if any one of you has ever seen a business plan fly, please raise your hand and I will call you a liar straight away, because it's just not going to happen. And I'm not saying that financial controlling is without purpose. my last business, we sold that to a large corporation, a public company, and I've been through controlling up and down, but that's not really the point. I'm just saying, if you talk to our VP engineering, he comes from quantum physics, and the guy is just such a brain, and the kind of innovation he delivers is so mind-blowing. So if I was an investor or a corporate, I would just really dig deep into the kind of innovation the company provides, the IP, the people behind the company, because in the end, the question about competition, it all circulates around the same issue. So who are your competitors? How big is your margin? It's all related to the same stuff. That means what's the brain power, the accumulated brain power in the company. So make an IQ test of the best 10 people in the company and then tell me what your product is and then take an investment decision based on nothing. And it's probably faster and better than any KPI-based business plan. And that's really my strong belief.
So normally the Q&A session starts later, but now that's, I think, an interesting statement. So we saw some corporate or VC guys in the audience. Any question to or comment to this? Herbert.
Yeah, hi. Coming from a large car manufacturer in Germany here, I can't cope with with what you said before regarding the mindset, because there are plenty of guys with the right mindset, and it's also frustrating for all these guys to bringing the right innovations to a serial project, because it's so frustrating sometimes. It's not that you're wrong, because there are plenty of guys in a huge corporate car manufacturer which have the maybe wrong mindset, but there are always guys fighting for, cooperations with or collaborations with guys of you, and it's for us also pretty frustrating.
Yeah, exactly. It is frustrating for you because you get limited by somebody else, and then it's not against you. Then it's like basically. Why are the people both who are just like triggering the money for you? Why are they not telling me, you know what, you're absolutely right, I should give you the money to invest in these guys? And this is a problem you see rather in a German Europe environment, and this is how we experience, and the reason why we experience that is, in my opinion, very simple. It is aviation, and we won't bring people in the sky, and this is when we would have provided just don't get this wrong, please. A software compared with 10 years of developing an aircraft is something completely different. And this is like this mindset for investing in deep tech hardware technology as something that you get thrown full with money when we would have done the same thing in Silicon Valley from day one. And this is something that doesn't happen in Europe or in particular in Germany. And this is what I meant basically behind it.
I just want to say really, sometimes you guys also need a little bit of patience, because there are guys also in the big companies who are fighting for a good collaboration with you guys. So, and totally. I think there are some also success stories and a lot of failure stories and fuck-up stories, but don't lose the hope.
No, absolutely. Just to give you an impression, the problem is we were bootstrapping all our prototypes for 3 years and on our own. And at some point we cannot have patience, because otherwise we're fucked. And this is like, seriously, there we need money. And when it comes, we have a technical due diligence in a seed round of 6 months. What the hell? I mean, this is not in the slightest how it has to move in Germany then. This is what we experienced, how we saw it, like on a daily basis. 50 investors who just said no, go away. So
can I pitch my favorite question to you? Why do you need hardware? I just love it.
Thanks. Yeah. Sorry, I think I have to go to my talk.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have kind of a point that that's not only about separating business models and deep tech, but also deep tech software, deep tech hardware. So you just made the point. This tech due diligence is just to really dig into the IP, into the technology, but somehow you also need to facilitate or utilize this knowledge later in the market to get it to a market innovation. So, Herbert, for example, what is your experience here? Like, is tech due diligence the only? I want to not say KPI, but
come join us.
Okay. Of course, it's important, but at these stages, much of the product, of the technology, still needs to be developed. So what we basically do is trying to get a grasp on the team, on the people, and their skills, their capability, and judge on that basis, and maybe some track record in completely different settings, whether we believe, and it's a belief, there's a probability to succeed, and attached to it to also fail, to that they actually will deliver on it. But we are investors in early stages, so tech DD, yeah, we check what's there, what people have done before, and we try to understand what it needs to actually build this product and technology, and from that we get some idea of the risk attached to it, and that's how it goes. But besides that, I think very much the team is in that stage extremely important. And that's another part of the due diligence.
Okay.
I was going to comment on the due diligence with corporates, tech due diligence as well, where you wait for many months, if not, more than half a year to get a response. I agree, there's some patience, but there's a whole cash flow problem at this kind of stage, that you can't wait that kind of length, and you can't wait to be in due diligence, or you can't be trying to sort out a contract over many, many, many months. Having a champion like yourself is amazing. If that champion can dive really deep into the higher echelons of that corporate, it would be super, super valuable from a startup perspective. The due diligence, I agree with you. Like, if you've got a team that have super brains in there, and you put in all those brains together, and you're causing brownouts throughout the city because of the energy that's getting sucked into that company, that is such a big part of. It doesn't matter what the product is. If you've got that kind of brain power, it's amazing.
Can I drop another one? How many lines of code did we write?
Depends how many.
I love that one as well.
Depends how many spaces you got between them.
Fantastic. Like it matters.
I'd be curious how Christoph Jensch would have reacted to this. So different size of code blocks in the blockchain area and the smart contracts.
So, any other comments from the audience to this? Otherwise, we would move to the last question and then do the Q&A.
Okay.
Or how is the time?
I think we're good for some questions.
Okay. We'll just have one question to all these guys. Like, what is your technology you dream of? Not for a business reason, but more like, which is really, what you are, where would you do your bets on for more human life? Like, not that we have another technology around us, attached to our head, attached to our body, but really that enables, and maybe in the background, facilitates some stuff?
Yeah, I think for me it's at the end full autonomy, what is also much more safer than today's human drivers. I'm a cyclist, and I experience human mistakes or human driver mistakes on my own skin. So, and I think also it would be a dream to have then an autonomous vehicle where we will not have like motion sickness, and we can really enjoy that. We are right now not that close to this point of time.
Yeah, so my wife's a physician, and we talk about medtech a lot at home. And I will give you one example of a company I've actually invested in myself. What they did was they created a machine that is able to produce a substance, which is pyruvate, and it can be used as a contrast substance to turn an MRI into a PET-CT. So it sounds like a minor change, right? You just use one medical tool versus another, but it's a true game changer because you don't need radio medicine for that. So the impact on the patient is much lower. And in the end, you will turn 40,000 MRI devices worldwide into PET CTs, which gives you a huge scope of new diagnostic possibilities. And what I'm trying to say is, with a minor change in technology, you can have a huge impact on society as a whole, and in this case, medical sciences. So I think there's big changes going on in that field. I'm super interested, but however, not competent enough to move into that field. But it's really the one field where I see the biggest leapfrog developments in the future, besides e-mobility, obviously.
Oh, I was waiting for you, sorry. I'm a super geek. I love the idea about artificial intelligence, machine learning. I think self-driving cars is a very, very small step towards understanding intelligence and what we can do with AI. And I'd love to be able to see that ubiquitous throughout the world in all aspects, from medical to transport.
Likewise, I think many of the topics are here at the conference actually, and I think they all will kind of converge in what we see that. So I was a researcher in intelligent systems theory, that intelligence, this concept of intelligence, and seeing it like diffuse from living like people or animals into things and into the world, and everything gets more and more networked and converges different themes and businesses, technologies converge, and this is absolutely fascinating, and watching this diffusion, and I think in 10 years from now it will be pretty unbelievable what we'll have. I hope it's a bright future, yeah, of course. Sure. Yeah.
So I just got the sign that we need to come to the end. Maybe one question from the audience? Somebody raised their hand. No? Okay, so we are at the end. Big thanks to our panelists. I think it was really interesting. Also the discussion how to really facilitate the technology to get to a market innovation, and I hope we can improve on that on all sides, from cooperation to regulation parties and maybe also startups. So yeah, let's make the thing work. Thank you.
Thank you.